Բարև ձեզ, բարի կալուս Tumo։ Սա մեր երրորդ master class-ն է այս տարվա համագործակցության շրջանակներում Ոսկե ծիրան 2015-ի հետ եւ երրորդ տարին է արդեն ինչ համագործակցում ենք ֆեստիվալի հետ եւ ուրախ ենք ձեզ ներկայացնել Պորտուգալիայից Nuno Senային, ով ձեզ կպատմի իր փորձի մասին կինեմատոգրաֆի եւ կինոֆեստիվալների ստեղծման ոլորտում։ Խնդրում եմ ծափահարություններ։
Thank you for coming, and I want to give a very quick introduction of myself and the reason why I'm here in Yerevan. I was invited to be part of the jury of the Golden Apricot Film Festival, so I'm now evaluating all the films in the documentary competition. We almost finished, so tomorrow we're going to be watching the last films, and on Saturday we're going to deliver our selection in the closing ceremony of the festival. When they invited me to do this masterclass, I thought a little bit about what should be the topic that I should address, and being my professional experience, mostly connected with the film festival also, but in Lisbon, which is IndieLisboa. It's a festival that I and a group of friends created in 2004. I think we have the same age of Golden Apricot Film Festival. We both started in 2004. And IndieLisboa is an international independent film festival. It's dedicated to films that provide newness, originality, innovation to cinema. So we don't like to show films that can be easily commercially released. We like to search for innovation in cinema, regardless of the format and duration. So we show short films, feature length, animation, experimental fiction, documentary, everything included. So you can visit the website, it's IndieLisboa.com. We just opened the submissions for our next edition in 2016, and everybody can apply, of course. And we receive a lot of applications from around the world, up to 5,000 films submitted every year to IndieLisboa, and we pick something like 200 to 250, depending, of course, on the lengths of the films also. So, as I was saying, when I thought about what should I address here, and because I'm also a film teacher, I'm besides running the film festival, I'm also teaching film in university in Portugal to students from the first year of a documentary film course. And what I teach is film history in general, film history, aesthetics, theory, history, and the first thing that I want to transmit to my students is that cinema is like a treasure ark. It's like the cave of Alibaba, you know, the story, where it exists thousands of films that have been kept there secretly, more or less, and that should be given the opportunity to be back on the life, to be watched again, to be seen again by each new generation of film goers. So, from my experience, my students usually, their cinephile memory starts the day they were born. Most of them haven't seen films that were created, that were made before they were born. It seems like there's some kind of resistance, and people tend to consider black and white cinema and silent cinema, for instance, as kind of archaic or primitive, something that couldn't be interesting in 2015. And I tried to tell them this is the wrong approach to film history, because I strongly believe that the best films of the world have been made already 100 years ago. I mean, the first masterpiece, absolute masterpiece of cinema, David Wark Griffith's Birth of a Nation, was a film shot in 1914. So that was already 1 century ago, but the film is still as fresh as it was in the day it was made. It's fresh in terms of narrative approach, in terms of the storytelling, the construction of characters, the development of an emotional system from the screen to the audience. And this was already in 1914. And I didn't think we go so far from that time in 1914. Sorry. So when I discussed, or when I was thinking about the topic of this masterclass, I picked this title, and the title of the masterclass is "Why Old Films Matter." Okay, why should we be looking to films that were made so long time ago and that were made with a different technology, 35mm, that were made in black and white, that were made without synchronous sound, and why is it so important to how do you say, get immersed in this film history, regardless of the period, regardless of the country. Also, I think film history, it's something that there are amazing pieces almost everywhere in the world created from the beginning of cinema, and you can find masterpieces, definitely in Armenian cinema, of course, but in Portuguese cinema, in Chinese cinema, in Japanese cinema. So the idea is to expand, keep your mind open, expand your experience to cinema, and try to see as much as possible, and not be constrained by what's happening right now in Hollywood or in French cinema or English-speaking countries cinema that tend to be defining what cinema is. I don't think there's a definition in cinema that's complete without acknowledging the contributions of cinema through different periods in the history of cinema, and also in different parts of the world. So the title of this conference could be also not only why old films matter, and the subtitle was something, well, kind of a joke, from A Trip to the Moon, Georges Méliès film, to Lord of the Rings, because I think it's the same film remade more than a century afterwards. But I think also the title could be Cinephilia as a Disease. So cinephilia, the love for cinema, the desire to know cinema, the desire to watch films, can be also something like a disease that you can, I hope, catch when you come, for instance, for a masterclass, or you turn on the television and there's an old film playing on the television, or you download a film that you've heard about, that you haven't seen, and you are exposed to it. So it's like an infectious disease that can be easily transmitted from person to person, and but it's a healthy thing. It's not I mean, it's not a bad disease. I think it's one of the most benign diseases in the world. And cinephilia can transform you. From my experience, I started watching films like everybody on the television. But back in the 70s, late 70s, when I was still a kid, television was something completely different from what it is today. I mean, there was, at least in Portugal, there was only one television channel. It was, of course, in black and white. And you cannot choose. You had to see what they were showing. But fortunately, for me and for all the generation of Portuguese, for my generation in Portugal, the people were running the television in Portugal. They were cinephiles. And they were programming these amazing films from Hitchcock, Lubitsch, Fritz Lang, all the great masters from the past. They were screening these films. They were transmitting these films at 9:30 in the evening, and not at 2 in the morning or 9 in the morning. So they were primetime television back then. And I was, without any effort, I was being exposed to this history of cinema without even knowing who were these people and not even that they were important in terms of film history. I was having fun watching these films. And there is no cinephilia without pleasure. I mean, cinephilia cannot be something that you force yourself into. You must really feel the urge to, little by little, acknowledging more about film history. And I think the best way is to start from very young. I mean, today, opportunities are, it's kind of a paradox. I mean, as I was telling you, when I was growing up, you can only see one television channel, and for that reason, I became a cinephile. But sometimes I'm afraid that now, with all the options that are open to a kid, a youngster, it's more difficult to find what can be more satisfying, or can be more fulfilling, or can be really developing your sense of knowledge of cinema and understanding cinema and cinema language in general. So maybe this incredible democratic choice could be also a kind of getting lost in the desert without a map. So I think what the most important role of, for instance, a film festival like IndieLisboa or Golden Apricot, or a distribution, an art house distribution, or a cinematheque, or is that they will be selecting or proposing something that otherwise you probably wouldn't see at all. So it's important that when you are starting your cinephile career, you should be able to have something to help you getting along the way. Not forcing you upon certain films and certain authors, but giving you as much information about, and of course the landmarks of cinema are important. You cannot be happy if you, by the age of 20 or 30, you haven't seen any film by Alfred Hitchcock, because then there will be missing part of the puzzle. It's important to see Hitchcock, it's important to see, as I said, David Wark Griffith was probably the first master of cinema, and of course to see Tarantino's films, or to stay in Armenia, Peleshian's films. I mean, you should expand your range from the beginning of early cinema to the most recent films, and also in terms geographically, you also should spread your net. Okay, so what I would like to tell you is that this cave of forgotten dreams, Ali Baba's cave, which is film history, is there to be discovered. It's not something that since it's much more easier to access these films today, it's important that everybody actively tries to find the films that can really fulfill them, that can really change the way of viewing cinema, and not only cinema. I think there's a close connection between cinema and life, and cinephilia goes with personality, it goes with your own life story, and the way that you perceive films is changing as you are changing, okay? And I think when I saw, as a kid, when I saw a Western by John Ford, I wanted to be John Wayne, okay? Fighting the Indians and the other cowboys. Afterwards, I want to be John Ford, the director, not the actor. But this means that you are seeing different things that you didn't see in the beginning. But it was important that as a kid, I grew fond of John Wayne and Henry Fonda or James Stewart, all these wonderful actors from the past that were amazing actors. But as a kid, the most important was to identify yourself with them. As, of course, a film critic or a film historian or a film teacher, I'm interested, of course, in the technique of acting of those actors. But it's impossible for me to separate technique from charisma. And those actors were exemplary on that fusion of star power and the ability to be a terrific film actor. So my challenge for today is that I will be showing you some clips from films that eventually some of you have seen from the first years of cinema. Because it's like when you enter this cave, there is this room right on the back of the cave. It's way back, so you really need to force yourself into that back room of the cave where the first films in film history are kept, which means films that were made after 1895, from Lumiere Brothers, from Edwin S. Porter, and other directors from the first years, from early cinema. So from 1895 to 1915, and 1915 is the year of David Wark Griffith's film, you have this amazing diversity of experiences being made on cinema. And I can say that almost everything in cinema that is important in cinema still today was invented on those first 20 years. I mean, popular genres like the Western, science fiction, horror movies, special effects, the language of cinema, the way you put together a shot with another shot and you create a link between shots in the audience mind. The kind of stories that were told in those first 20 years, they're all they were very important, and so important that they became like something like the original language of cinema, and that original language is still being spoken today. At least I believe this. Also, another thing that was invented, it's very funny because we'll be speaking more and more about, I imagine it's also a question in Armenia, illegal downloading of films, okay? It's a big problem everywhere for studios, that so many films now are watched without nobody paying for them to be seen. So piracy and downloading was also invented back in 1895. So films that were made, for instance, popular films by Georges Méliès, they were simply copied by other people, and they were screened without the permission and without the payment of any screening fees. So the studios also, I mean, the idea of that the film is created, the best way to create a film is to get yourself inside a studio where you can control the sound, the lights, the decors, the actors. So studios also were, from the year 2 or third year of the cinema, films start being made on studios. Also, this contemporary trend that in fact it's very old, of blockbusters, of sequels, of remakes, everything that we consider to be our contemporary cinema scene was already in place back in 1905, for instance. And maybe I can start with that. I'm going to show you an interesting example of both a remake in early cinema and also some kind of piracy. I mean, because the remake didn't ask permission to be remade. I mean, I'm going to show you a film by it's one. I won't show it entirely, but I will start by showing you some bits of Georges Méliès' A Trip to the Moon. Okay, it's a film from the very first years of cinema. It's a blockbuster. It was a blockbuster. It was one of the first hits that was shown everywhere in the world. That made lots of money. That was very influential because it also created this idea that science fiction was an interesting genre to be developed in cinema. And The Trip to the Moon was responsible for also for the popularity of special effects in cinema, okay? And Georges Méliès, he was a pioneer of special effects in cinema, as you will see in the film. So I'm going to show you first A Trip to the Moon. And then I will show you a remake of it. As it started, began remaking formulas and stories, and began telling the same story in a different way. Because it's very interesting that in cinema, it's very rare, it doesn't happen a lot, that people watch the same film again, okay? So if you see, for instance, Lord of the Rings once, most of the times you are satisfied and you don't want to see it again. But you don't mind watching the same story with different actors and directed in a different style. So what's interesting is that I think it's a line by French director Jean-Luc Godard, is that the film is the only industry that only produces prototypes, which means, like, unlike the auto industry, for instance, where you get the cars being made exactly the same way, the same model is replicated millions and millions of times. In cinema, you made the prototype, for instance, Titanic, and you cannot you cannot sell the same film again. In order to sell it, you need to make it under a different title, and instead of getting Kate Winslet and Leonardo DiCaprio, you get, I don't know, Michael Patterson or something like that. So this idea that in cinema, you're always interested in novelty, in seeing new stuff, even if in the end it's the same story all over again. Okay, so I will start then with A Trip to the Moon. The film is almost sorry, the film is almost 20 minutes long. So no, it's 15 or 16 minutes long. So maybe I will show you some highlights of the film to get you in the mood, and then we're going to see a contemporary remake of A Trip to the Moon. So if this is working, yeah, sure. Okay. By the way, this is a restoration made very recently with the original colors of the film and with a new soundtrack by a French group, a contemporary French group. Okay, we can stop there. So when cinema was invented, of course, it was invented as a new technology, but in a way, cinema had already been announced in different arts, in other arts. I mean, what was so interesting in cinema is that way it was able to soak up so much of the contemporary popular popular culture. I mean, a film such as Trip to the Moon was I don't know if you know, but there's a book by Jules Verne, the French writer, that was a big bestseller. So it was a bestseller, and cinema from the beginning started from borrowing from different sources, from theater, from literature, from popular culture, and in a way, most of the films in the first years of cinema are remakes in cinema of something that were popular under a different technology. Okay, I don't know if you're familiar with the term lanterna mágica. Does the name tells you lanterna mágica? I think it's a Latin expression about these very old devices where you were projecting images, not with movement, or at least not with the kind of movement you can see in cinema, but they were kind of announcing the desire of man, which is a very old desire, to watch moving images. I mean, Chinese shadows and the paintings in the cave walls in the prehistoric art, they share the same anthropological desire to animate things, to create something that is similar to something real, and picture of life, which is movement, which is the impression that something is living and moving. And in a way, the first films of cinema were just happy to to have this feeling of movement, and they were adapting stories or situations that were already part of popular culture. For instance, this book by Jules Verne. So, and what's interesting is that initially, cinema, and this is a film by Georges Méliès, he was probably the most important filmmaker of the period, is a lot like film theater, isn't it? You get these compositions where you are almost on the same situation as you could be on a theater watching a play. So, and the characters, they tend to overact, right? And they tend to emphasize. There's no sound, of course. There's no dialogue, no text, not even intertitles. So, also the tradition of popular theater is present, very present in the first years of cinema, particularly fiction films. Documentaries, the Lumière tradition of films, it's a different story. And the film, of course, for a 1902 production, is exactly made in the same way a film is today. I mean, you have to hire actors, you have to write a script, you have to find them costumes, you have to set the decor, and you have to film them and retake them and edited material. So in terms of film production, nothing has changed since back then. Of course, style has changed. The style of acting, camera movements, and the kind of photograph that you can see, of course, in a modern film. It's so different from this one. But in the end, what Georges Méliès was doing with A Trip to the Moon is exactly what Peter Jackson is trying to do when he does the trilogy of Lord of the Rings, is to inspire viewers to see something that they had never seen before, something that will take them, wow, something awesome, something really absolutely visually captivating. And this desire to impress was the first impulse to go and see films. That's why early cinema, also called primitive cinema, is considered to be mostly a voyeuristic art. It's narrative and storytelling is not so perfect because viewers were so happy to be watching these beautiful images. And for instance, the famous shot where the moon is eaten by the rocket, which still is one of the most famous shots in cinema. So I'll let you see it again. Okay. Oh, sorry. Well, the idea is that it has been quoted so many times, and I don't know. I could have called this From a Trip to the Moon to Interstellar. You know, the reaction when you went to see Interstellar by Christopher Nolan. It's not that we are still the same audience that we were back in 1902. So we are going to see Interstellar, waiting or hoping to be transported to something that is completely beyond our normal experience. And the idea to immerse yourself in that story and the way that a contemporary viewer can be immersed in Christopher Nolan's films in that particular film is not so different from the viewer that went to see A Trip to the Moon in 1902. So now I wanted to show you, and that was as announced, I would like to show you something that was made just after this film. Sorry. Okay, I don't know if it's going to work. No, it's divided. Maybe I can. Okay, let me try to do it differently. No, sorry, is there? I don't see the No, I don't see the. Yeah. Sorry. And so just after Méliès, so, well, as I was telling you, the film, so the film was a success. I mean, everybody that went to see the film, and they probably saw it more than once. The film was playing throughout the world for several months, even years. And then some of the people who saw it thought, okay, I can make this. I can try and make my own A Trip to the Moon. And in fact, dozens of remakes of A Trip to the Moon were made in the years to follow. One of the most famous is this film titled An Excursion to the Moon, a French film, also a French film, by a director very much less known than Méliès, but he was also a very interesting director, is Segundo de Chaumont. And it's also, it's a remake almost sequence by sequence of the original film, but shorter, and but they don't have any problems copying exactly the same recipe again. So I will let you show this concentrated version. It's only 6 minutes and 45 seconds, and I want to see it and to understand also that even it's a different production, it's a different director. The style is exactly the same you see in Méliès. So fixed shots, always showing all the entire frame with the actors in like a theater, like inside a real theater. So, can we have a little light, please? Not too much, but okay. So, thank you. So the idea is that I don't believe in progress in cinema. I don't believe in progress in art. I mean, art are not like a technology or any kind of form or that can be developing in a continuous line. Art is made out of something that can take several different roads to take you to different places, sometimes very unexpectedly. And I think instead of development, I prefer the word change. Cinema is changing, and it has been changing since its beginning. But I always try to fight against this prejudice that that cinema history has a development. It has no development. It has not developed nothing since 2002 or 3 or something of the sort. It has changed. It has changed a lot because, well, technical changes were introduced, and there was, of course, the first films were short films. By contemporary terms, it's Méliès, and this film, they are short films. They are under 15 minutes or under something like that. But of course, these changes don't affect the essentials of cinema, which is storytelling through a visual art, a visual form. Okay, and I think that it's like we are constantly inventing the wheel in cinema. So each new change brings back something that was invented, but then was forgotten, and then it seems that it has been invented without nobody remembering what was the original form. I will tell you an example of this. When YouTube was first becoming popular, I mean, most of the stuff that you used to see in YouTube, and you still do, right? It hasn't changed that much. But when YouTube showed up, I was surprised by the similarity between the most popular clips in YouTube and the first films in the history of cinema, which were films that usually evolved around a funny situation, a joke, an event, a very limited event, something that you can watch in 30 seconds and 1 minute or something like that, and that you find either funny or disturbing or surprising or something like that. So primal emotions, mostly primal emotions. And I think YouTube aesthetics is connected to fulfilling a need for immediacy of visual pleasure. Okay, and I think it's like we are being subject to the same experience that when cinema was invented. The people who got in to see films not in regular cinemas, but mostly in theaters or fairs or markets, they want to be simply entertained and give us entertainment, and that popular origin of cinema has been the most important one in its evolution. But I would say something that in order to confuse things a little bit, I would say that there's two options, and I think this is important for film students or people who are interested in film, either as film critics or film students or whatever. Is that I think since the beginning, film was about two possible ways, regardless of film styles, regardless of the specific period when the films were made. One is the belief that more is more, is that film is as good as the things you put in it. I mean, for Méliès and for Christopher Nolan or for Peter Jackson, this idea that in order to impress the viewer, you have to be able to provide them and fulfill them, adding stuff and putting the most in films, put the most spectacular special effects, the most charismatic actors, the most brilliant visuals. So this idea that more is more. And in a much more clandestine way, I mean, much more subtle, there was this other way to make films that believe that less is more, okay? And I think the father of less is more in cinema was the American director D.W. Griffith. So we started making films in 1908 or 1907, something like that. And he continued making films until the early 1930s. And during this period of more than 20 years, he made something like, which is something that still strikes me as almost impossible. He made almost 500 films, okay? He started with short films, but the films were progressively longer. And in the end, he had made almost 500 films. And in these 500 films, he was testing and repeating this same idea, is that cinema is not about what you put on the screen, is what you can create in the mind of the viewer without having to show too much, okay? And the effectiveness, I think still today, of David Ward Griffiths, comparing, for instance, for Méliès, where, of course, I'm entertained by a Méliès film, but I cannot say I'm deeply and emotionally involved in the film. I'm entertained in the but I feel not only one of the characters. I'm invited to be part of the film. I watch a Méliès film and I'm outside, but in a Griffith film, as in a good classical narrative film, I'm supposed to be living besides the characters and sharing their emotions and projecting myself in them and identifying myself with them. And in order to do this, you don't have to pile up special effect and extravagant sceneries or costumes or figurines. You have to be able to create something that can be psychological fulfilling without, and I think that's the greatest discovery by David Ward Griffith, is that cinema was what you were about to create, what was created in your head, not only on the cinema, on the screen. Of course, what's in the screen is important, but the importance of cinema, or the interest of cinema, is that you should be able to create like a mental film. So, and this has to do with notions in cinema, very important notions in cinema, like of screen space, of ellipsis, of the power of suggestion being much more effective than showing the whole thing. Okay, and this is still true today. I mean, unfortunately, most of American commercial cinema has forgotten the legacy of David Griffith. I think most of the American cinema today puts too much and leaves no space for the audience to create the film, to fill in the spaces with something very important, which is part of the process of film watching. And but I think still today, what's important in cinema is this balance. I would say the important is the balance between what you see and what you are able to imagine. And most of the films in during the first years of cinema is about seeing, but after 1913, 1914, especially with David Ward Griffiths, the films were about imagining, creating an imaginary film in your head, of course, with the materials that are on the screen, but much more richer than just what is on the screen. And the power of suggestion, the power of creating an idea in your head without having to show you the complete scene or element, is very interesting in terms of cinema. So, and from that, you have still today filmmakers and filmmaking formulas that have to give you all the answers and give you all the clues and everything, and filmmakers that know that less is more. As in other arts, also in cinema, I think less is more. And the notion that the cinema is in fact a spiritual art. It's not only material, composed of the materials of the screen, of the chairs where we are watching now, and of the technical tools that are used to make the films. These are all important in the way that they are able to create these imaginary films in people's minds. So as I was telling, I think it's important for cinephilia that the films are watched in a cinema like this. I mean, this is not an official cinema, but it's very close to one. The idea that you are immersed in the dark, that something brighten in front of you, which is a screen, and something is being projected, I think was part of the popularity of cinema. I don't know if cinema was seen back in 1895 in cellular, in iPhones. I don't think cinema will ever be as important as it is today. So becoming a cinephile is also to be able to immerse yourself so deeply in these objects that you are allowed to forget the outside world and to forget. But watching it together with other people is also important. I think more and more the tendency of cinema, of film watching, is connected with an individual practice, which is contradictory to the long tradition of cinema being watched community. And also the idea that you can watch a film comfortably at home in your iPhone or in the computer or on the DVD. So there's this paradox which I found very interesting, and it's very let's see what happens next, because I really cannot tell. I'm not a prophet, so I don't know where we are going, but I know that the road is changing, and what's happening now, it's very interesting, because nowadays more films are being made than in any time in film history. So the production is still increasing because, of course, digital filmmaking makes it much more accessible. And films are made in countries in the world where there used to be any films. So more and more films are being produced, and more films are being watched, of course, because these films are watched, but they are watched in a complete different conditions. Okay, the cinema venue, the film theater is still important, but I doubt that it's still the most important film viewing situation. And I don't know how that will affect films in the future in terms of its own form and content and language. Though it's kind of like an irony, like a revenge. When film was invented, and this is something that you probably know, the film was invented almost simultaneously in France by the Lumiere brothers, and in the United States by Thomas Edison, the famous American inventor who invented electric lights, for instance, and the gramophone. He also invented cinema. I mean, not cinema, he invented film. He invented a way to record and display pictures in movement, okay, moving images. But Edison, the original idea of Edison was that film would be better seen individually, looking through a peephole. You probably know the device he created. So you had to look inside a small orifice, and you put a coin, and this activated the mechanism, and you were watching the film by yourself. Nobody else was watching the same film you were watching, and it was like, in fact, like home viewing. So it's kind of an irony that Edison failed. He was after a couple of years, his prototype, the kinetoscope, was defeated by the Lumiere prototype, which is the cinematograph, which is a machine very close to what traditional 35mm projectors were during a long time. So a machine that produces images in a dark environment to be watched collectively. So even if Edison was defeated back in 1895, he lost the war, a commercial war between these two different prototypes. In the end, it's like the return of the repressed. So 100 years later, I think what we are doing now when we watch a film in the iPad or the iPhone or in the computer is to confirm Edison's initial intuition that cinema is a voyeuristic art, that it's better when seen alone. Okay, and this idea, I think it's one of the most interesting echoes of film history throughout time. There's plenty of ironies like this. I mean, for instance, 3D system, which is now again a big thing, was first invented in the 50s, and it was invented because cinema was losing the battle against television. Television was becoming the most important and popular form of entertainment, and the guys in the studios, in the American studios, Universal, MGM, etc., they were concerned that they were losing market, and they decided to create this system where television at the time couldn't really go into. So it was 3D. They invented CinemaScope. They invented even films with sense. And 3D was also part of this idea of attracting back the audience that was preferring to be sitting in front of a television set instead of going to the cinema. And 3D was not the success that it was expected to be, and it was abandoned until very recently. And I think the reason the 3D was resurrected, I think it's the same reason, is that, again, cinema is losing audience to other forms of film viewing, naturally television, DVD, the internet, etc. So, in a way, we've seen this story before. So it's like cinema is being repeated, these films, these ideas are being repeated over and over again. And that's why I don't like at all the idea of progress in film history. Change, and to understand how things change, and to be able to locate in something that is happening now, or its original, its origins. I mean, you go back in time and you probably will find something that will explain what's happening now. I mean, that's why I think film history is so important for a film goer or film critic, or not only professionals, of course, but amateur filmmakers, because you can learn so much more about what you are doing now. You can understand better what you are doing now, and you are able to jump, you know, instead of having to do all the mistakes by yourself. You learn from what other people made in the past, and you are able to learn more. I think it's important that when you start working in films, you have the access to this incredible library, okay, of older films, and this library should be visited once in a while in order to refreshen your own imagination and your own ability. So when Segundo de Chaumont was ripping off Méliès, of course, he was robbing him, but at the same time, it's kind of like an homage to Méliès. And when Méliès was robbing Victor Hugo, Jules Verne, the writer of the book which A Trip to the Moon is based, it's also a form of transmission. So I think that's very important in film practice, is that everybody who is working in film should be able to know more about cinema, but not only cinema, also theater, literature, because cinema is kind of this specific art that has been boring or robbing, depending on what you feel about it, from everybody since the beginning. And I think it's important that cinema was the most exemplary art of the 20th century. I think it's really the product of the 20th century, the development of urban life, cityscapes being the new environment, the changes in politics, in society, in arts, and film was using those changes in order to promote himself, but it was also important to make changes in society, in terms of mentality, in terms of what's fashionable one day and not the other, etc. So learning about film history is also learning about politics, history, even economics. I mean, the story of the economics of cinema, it's so interesting to understand why the first studios in cinema were created, why, in a way, the big major American studios, MGM, for instance, was in the beginning fighting against the monopoly of Edison and his company, and the way that there are so many stories inside film history that explains you not only an art form, but also humanity, history, cultural, and I think it's a great way to be introduced to a foreign culture. For instance, it's my first time in Armenia, but I can say I learned a lot from watching Armenian films. Peldeshian is one of the great directors for me in documentary and experimental filmmaking. And even before coming here, I was. It seemed like I already knew something about your culture and about Armenia, and I think cinema is a way to also to be introduced to so many things besides only stories or storytelling. Okay, so I think it's, if you want to make any comments on what I said, I think it's now it would be the appropriate time to do it. I brought some other stuff, but I don't think there's time for it. But maybe I finish before you be with a very short film, which is titled Dog Factory, and for me it's it's an example of this idea that YouTube is again primitive cinema, is primitive cinema repeated all over again. So let me show you this very short film produced by Edwin S. Porter, not directed by him. He was a producer, not a director. I mean, he was a director, but essentially the films were made collectively. And I will show you Dog Factory. Can we turn down the lights, please? Yeah. Okay, so dogs were popular like cats today in YouTube, right? So if you have any questions, any comments on what we said and what I mentioned about this film history being Alibaba Cave, or in case you want to add something to what I said, I'm open to hear you. You can ask me in Armenian, and somebody can translate if you want to. Okay, so I thank you for your presence, and hope to see you again during the festival. So the festival is happening until Sunday. I think film festivals are important to keep this legacy of cinema alive. It's a nice way to see films inside a real cinema with other people and having a common experience. So hope that you can watch as many films as possible until the end of Golden Apricot Film Festival. Thank you for your presence. Thank you.